titled The Unquiet Ones, A History of Pakistani Cricket by Osman Samiuddin. We would appreciate if complete silence is observed while the session is in progress. The question and answer session will commence with the question and answers. Please keep your questions short and precise and refrain from making a statement. Please raise your hands and the microphone will be brought to you. Our moderator for this session is Kamila Shamsie, and the guest speakers are Murad Moosa Khan, Nadeem Paracha, and Osman Samiuddin. Kamila Shamsie is regarded as among the most accomplished of Pakistani novelists writing in English. Hailing from Karachi, she is the author of 6 novels, including Burnt Shadows, which was shortlisted for the Orange Prize for Fiction and has been translated in more than 20 languages. 3 of her novels have won awards from the Pakistan Academy of Letters. In 2013, she was named among Granta magazine's Best of Young British Novelists. Kamila Shamsie.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming to what should be a lively session here. It's my very great privilege and delight to be here launching Osman Samiuddin's fantastic new book, The Unquiet Ones. Just to introduce people who probably don't need very much by way of introduction. Osman Samiuddin is, I don't think there's too much argument, the finest writer on Pakistan cricket around, formerly of ESPN, now with The Nation. And I think many of us have been waiting a great many years for him to write this book. Next to him is Nadeem Paracha, again very well known, I'm sure to everyone, as a columnist and cultural critic. And beside him, Dr. Murad Moosa Khan, a psychiatrist, which is a profession all cricketing tragics are badly in need of. Murad's great claim to fame is the reason he didn't travel to the US for studies is because they didn't play cricket there, which may indicate you need some help from your own profession or not. But I'm very pleased to have them here to join me in launching Osman's book, The Unquiet Ones. It's a fantastic book. It's a book that takes up that old line, what do they know of cricket, who only cricket know, and really deals with it very beautifully. In looking at cricket, Osman is also giving us a social, cultural, political history of Pakistan from partition until now. It's a book of great humor. It's filled with fantastic anecdotes. One of the great things about it, of course, is because we are such a young country, and we forget that because so much tends to happen in our history, that the originators of Pakistani cricket were still alive for Osman to speak to. So he has wonderful anecdotes from those who were there right at the beginning, great stories and insight. It's also a very pleasurable book to read at the level of the sentence. There's a very early bit, it's in the first chapter, it's when the book won me over completely, when he's talking about the number of games that were going on concurrently at Minto Park, and rather than just saying a number of games were going on concurrently, he said, one game's slip was always another game's deep square leg, which is a great elegant cover drive of a sentence, I think. And also, I think buckets of ink have been spent writing about Imran Khan's bowling action. And Osman gives us this diamond among them. His action, such a leaping study in the beauty and grace of the human form, all it needed was a catwalk. Please join me in welcoming Osman Samiuddin, Nadeem Paracha, and Dr. Murad Moosa Khan. Osman, I'm going to ask start with a question which I've asked you before, and you gave an answer that was partly very discomforting to me because it involves Zia ul Haq, but we'll get into that. And the question was, how did we become a nation so obsessed? It wasn't obvious, I think, in August 1947, the role cricket would play in the nation. How did it happen?
Oh, people can go read my book. No, I think...
seminal moments. Let's start with seminal moments in the development of that love.
I think, they had a good team. They had a pretty good setup. Even when Pakistan came into being, they had the infrastructure of kind of North India at that time. They had players who had played for India. Kardar was one. Fazal had been picked. Oh, sorry. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, so they had a pretty decent structure in place when partition happened from North India. Guys like Kardar had played for India, Fazil Mahmood, Imtiaz Ahmed. A lot of these guys had played first-class cricket in India at that time. So they had a pretty good base. Then they had great educational institutions here, Islamia College, Government College, the school system in Lahore, who had cricket just as part of their curriculum, and they gave some kind of importance to it. And I think it really helped when, so they beat India in their second test ever in Lucknow, which was a great moment. But I think the first really seminal moment was obviously the Oval Test win in England in 1954. And I think that was broadcast after much bureaucratic wrangling on BBC.
There's an interesting role that the Duke of Edinburgh played in this. This is among the many anecdotes. You discover the Duke of Edinburgh, who I never had much time for, is actually someone now I have to have time for.
So, they were broadcasting commentary on BBC, which used to be relayed to Radio Pakistan so that Pakistanis could hear it. But the problem was that they were starting every day after the lunch session for some logistical reason. And on the last day, somebody at the Sindh Cricket Association realized that the match was going to be over before lunch, probably. And so I think I don't remember now from the book, but I think it was Iskandar Mirza who was told that we're not going to have this broadcast, and how should we go about doing it? And I think his first response was something like, who the hell is this BBC? What's the BBC's problem? Why are they not doing anything? But he then got in touch with the Duke of Edinburgh, and they managed to broadcast that morning session, when Pakistan won, and that was just like a huge trigger moment, I think, in Pakistan to beat a country that had for so long just been ruling you at a game that they had invented in a manner which was kind of very, very, even early back then, was very Pakistani, to drop catches, to not bat well, to fall over themselves, to have rifts in the side, to not like each other. And of course, to have this fast bowling god, Fazil Mahmood's probably the most handsome man to have come out of this country. And to have him scripting it at that time, I think that was like, one of the first, probably the first very, very seminal moments to have it on radio. And it kind of just, kicked off from there. There were other moments. TV came into Pakistan. Pakistan beat India in India. That was another big moment. In Pakistan, sorry, in 78, that was another big moment. So it kind of, it rumbled along. It was getting there. A lot of small things happened. And then suddenly you had these massive, massive victories. And India, beating India was a massive thing. And Ziaul Haq, as we've mentioned, was a dictator. He'd just come in at the time. He'd replaced, he'd thrown out Bhutto, not replaced him, but he'd kind of thrown him out. And a lot of people say that, he was more than happy to have cricket on the TV 7 hours a day because it kept people from kind of agitating against him. And so cricket kind of, sunk in from there. And I think it's these moments and these kind of things that you wouldn't expect that have just come together, much in the way a Pakistan win usually just comes together from nowhere. And it is now, what it is. It's like a majburi. Cricket's gone beyond just a sport in this country. I think it is fully a majburi. You might hate the team, you might not like them, you might not want to watch it, but come February 15th against India, for example, in a couple of weeks, you will be sitting there. I guarantee you, all of you will in some way be involved with that match.
Nadeem, can I bring you in on this?
Yeah.
If you had to talk about sort of seminal moments in why cricket has become this majburi, what would you say?
Well, I agree with him. Over the years, like for example, with all the other sports almost vanishing, like for example, till about mid-1970s, hockey used to be far more popular than cricket. And something wrong happened with hockey. They started playing on AstroTurf, which we weren't all that good. And cricket, then after the Kerry Packer revolution in 1977, a lot of more money started getting into cricket. I think that played a role as well. A lot of young people who wanted to turn a sport into a profession, they started looking towards cricket. I think economics and these sort of things, and of course, again, politics, I agree with him. For example, 1978, when Pakistan beat India in Lahore and Karachi, Ziaul Haq was very happy. And he was happy that most of the people were just glued to the TV and not coming out. That's why in 1978 in Gaddafi Stadium, in 1977, I remember, just before the Indian series, Nusrat Bhutto had to choose Gaddafi Stadium to protest against Ziaul Haq because she knew that's where the people will be. So all these political reasons, cultural reasons played, and over the years, other sports sort of died out because talent wasn't there, the money wasn't there, but cricket kept on growing, and we were doing very well, especially under Imran. And before that, Mushtaq, we started producing results. That started giving us international recognition. And we lapped down to that, and we haven't looked back after that.
Murad, what does cricket mean to the psyche of the nation? Little question there.
Gentle half volley to get you off the mark.
I think it's madness.
It's madness. Okay.
It's madness, but of a very positive kind. In madness also you require someone to step out of the comfort zone. You require someone to think in a very different way. And I think cricket for us also kind of defines us in that way. There is obviously a lot of imitation of life.
Murad, do you want
Oh.
to try and take that off the stand and just hold it? That might
There are plots and subplots, and I think for Pakistan, the way our whole society is organized, the intrigues that go on, the kind of chaos and mayhem that we have, I think a lot of it is reflected within cricket, and I think we, at some level, we kind of relate to that.
You're very good in the book, Osman, about talking about the early days and the psyche of a young nation and the concept of jazba, which you talk about a lot. Can you talk about jazba and cricket and a young nation a little?
Oh God, yeah. I think when I was researching the book, and this is one of the things that I loved doing about the book, was that I got to learn a lot just about the country. And I had come to Pakistan fairly new, and I used to visit a lot, but I didn't know much about the country. And when I was researching it, I just found that everything I read about cricket was in some way, connected to the country, to the wider country at the time. And I think one of the main things of that early year was that there was this, a lot of things went wrong in those early years as well. But I think this is what I wrote in the book, was that there was like a kind of general consensus and a willingness and this jazba that kind of, we are a new country, we can do things. And I think the cynicism hadn't set in at that time, even though, a lot of stuff had happened that wasn't great. But I think there was generally this kind of spirit. And that translated itself into the cricket. Because if you imagine, this team was made up of amateurs. They didn't get paid much. They were fairly, most of them were fairly well off anyway, and they could afford to play cricket. But they weren't paid much, and they had no real reason to kind of to go out there and perform every day like a professional does. Because they weren't really being treated like professionals. They didn't used to live in hotels together when they traveled. They used to travel second class on trains, and they had none of these things kind of going for them. And I think what drove a lot of, especially Kardar was instrumental in that first period. He was just like he was an ambassador for the country. There's a story about him at some function. They were on their way back from India, I think, and they stopped off in Burma. And I think the British Prime Minister was there, and he happened to be talking about the subcontinent, the new countries, and he mentioned India, and he didn't mention Pakistan. And it incensed Kardar so much that his next move was generally just basically to gesture his team to walk out and protest. And if you had that kind of feeling coming down from the captain, I think it infiltrated at some level into pretty much everyone who was playing the game, whether they were part of the Pakistani team or whether they were playing club cricket. It kind of just filtered down that, we're doing this for Pakistan. We're a new country, we want to prove ourselves, and I think the default setting, and Nadeem will know this as well, the default setting in Pakistan is to kind of go out and prove yourself from a corner. You're up against it, people are expecting you to fail, nobody expected Pakistan to be a country and to run as a country, let alone to produce the kind of, moments that it has. And I think that was embedded in Pakistan very early on, that look, nobody expects us to do anything, and we're basically going to go out there, prove them wrong, and do it for ourselves. And by default, we're doing it for the country we're in. And that kind of jazba, I think that's more than this passion or whatever. I think it's that jazba, which is it's a particular word. I don't think using passion kind of downplays it. It is just that jazba, which is a very, very, I think, Pakistani cricket thing that kind of pushed them on.
And do we still have it? And this is for all three speakers. What's happened is jazba still around? Is it there in cricket and the nation? Have the two come adrift from each other, or are we in danger of losing it everywhere?
I think it's, as far as the cricket team is concerned, I think it's there. Guys like, if you look at some of the guys who come into the side, where they come from, there's no way they would make it in any other walk of life, I think, from the situations that they come out of. Guys like Mohammad Amir, guys like Junaid Khan, who come from these really small places, and everything is kind of stacked against them from birth, pretty much, apart from the fact that they have a life. Everything's stacked against them, and for them to make it, and they, we might not like them, we might not like guys like Kamran Akmal or Imran Farhat or these new guys, but at some level this Jazba has kind of propelled them to where they are now. As far as cricket goes, we might not see it on the field every time, but I think it's there, for sure.
Nadeem, Jazba in cricket and the nation?
Yeah, I think it's still there, but the only difference is now it has a sponsorship. It's sponsored by Coke and cold drinks and Pepsis, and I think that sort of tainted it a bit. And you're not exactly sure that the Jazba you're seeing on television, is it just make-believe? Is just models jumping up and down and talking about Jazba and passion, or is there something really there? But as far as the fans are concerned, I think it's still there. The Junooniyat, the madness is still there, very much there.
Murad, would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think Jazba is there, and I think it will always remain there. If we lose Jazba, I think we'll be finished as a nation, and I don't think we'll be finished ever. I think we are extremely resilient, and the challenge really is how to channelize that Jazba in a more positive way. So we're going through a very difficult time, both Pakistan as well as Pakistan cricket, but I think Jazba is something that will see us through this.
As I've already indicated, many pleasures in the book. For me, one of the greatest ones was that it allowed me to get to know about a period of Pakistan history which I really didn't, which was a period pre-80s, and particularly those early years of Kardar and Fazal, who were, I knew were names and legends, but Osman's book really brings them alive in wonderful ways. And one of the things you're very good at doing is creating links between generations. And there's an interesting point on captaincy, which is that Kardar and Imran fell into one kind of pattern of captaincy, and Mushtaq Muhammad and Javed Miadad fell into another. And then, possibly as surprising to many, you come out saying that the Miadad model possibly, is more alive and kicking in the Pakistan team of today. Will you talk about these two kinds of captaincy?
Yeah, I think the Kardar Imran model is the kind, and even I say that it's kind of, it's a mixture of even men, leaders like Jinnah and Bhutto, in that there's a certain kind of autocracy there. And I think, I hate generalizing, but you could probably say that the times when I know it's like saying Pakistanis respond to the danda. And I think that's a very it's a glib kind of statement, but I think it works at some level that some guy up there, we like to invest our hopes and beliefs in one man. We don't like to do it, but somehow it works out that way, that it does work. I think Imran, from the force of his personality, Kardar definitely from the force of his personality, and they were dictators. Kardar and Imran were dictators in their own way, completely over the team. They controlled every aspect of the team. Kardar down to booking the hotels for his team, booking train tickets for his team. He controlled every aspect of it, and in a way, it's a nice, easy way out for us to kind of just let someone deal with all that, and you respond to that. So I think Imran and Kardar were kind of from that paintbrush, very dried and old paintbrush. But someone like Miadad always appealed to me in Mushtaq because they were so much more of this country. They were kind of very much products of the way Pakistan is. Miadad had grown up literally in Karachi all his life, and the only thing he knew was the kind of Karachi way of playing, of leading, of being smart, of not taking a step back. Guys like Imran and Kardar, they got respect automatically from what they were, from where they were from the way they were. Guys like Miadad and Mushtaq, they had to fight for respect. They knew that you're not going to be given anything on a platter in this country, and you have to go out there and fight your way through. And I think that's the kind of captaincy. I don't know if it's worked better, but it's appealed to me more because it's more troubling. It's difficult. It's kind of like democracy in this country. You have to kind of live through it. You can't just say that, oh, bring the army in and let's just let this one guy run it, and we're going to try to be kind of numb to what's happening. You have to be involved, and I think the greatness of Miadad and Mushtaq both was that they had this kind of democratic setup, and they were very much Pakistani. Kardar and Imran, you can almost say that they were, maybe they were more British than they were Pakistani, but Miadad and Mushtaq, they grew up from this system, and they represented, I think, something far truer about the way Pakistan cricket is and has become. And I think Miyadad, in that sense, has had a far greater impact on the Pakistani player and the way he is than Imran has. Not taking a step back. Miyadad, I said, he wasn't a kind of guy who he didn't just turn the other cheek when he was slapped. He would pretend that he was slapped and feel victimized and then slap back. he was that kind of guy, and I think that represents something about Pakistan a little bit better than something like Imran, who was probably more comfortable in London, and even Kardar to an extent than Mushtaq and Miyadad were.
It also represents something in Pakistan that's a statement that got applauded. Let's slap back someone who didn't slap you to begin with. And of course, you also bring up the fact which sometimes get lost in the haze of our deification of Imran as captain, and he was a stunning captain. But the fact that Miyadad actually equaled him in test wins as captain, 14 apiece. And you also make the point, we can see your Miyadad bias there, which is, Imran captained with Miyadad in the team, whereas Miyadad almost always had to captain without Imran. And so in some ways had the weaker side. Murad?
I think an important point is that all four captains you've mentioned, particularly Imran and Kardar, they may have been autocratic, but they really performed on the field. And I think their performance was something that gained the respect beyond what the style of captaincy was.
Yeah, completely. I think, Imran's figures as a captain, and he said, when I spoke to Imran, he said that that's the only way you can survive as a captain, which Misbah is now proving as a test captain at least, that if you keep performing yourself, then it's very, very difficult to kind of, come storm, come flood, come whatever natural calamity, I don't think anything will remove Misbah, because he's just performing all the time. And I think that's the one key rule. Whatever kind of captain you are, like Murad said, you could be Kardar, you could be Imran. If you're performing yourself, then it's very, very difficult to not respond to that as a player and to remove you as an administrator, which is generally what they try and do. So.
All right, here's a question. Miyadad's clearly your favorite captain, but who's the best captain? Was that also Miyadad?
That's
If you had to name a Pakistan 11 of all time, who would captain it?
I would have Wasim Akram, but that's my own personal bias, because I don't think there's been a greater player in this world than Wasim Akram. So I would have Wasim as captain.
But was he as great a captain? Was Wasim a great captain?
I think in his own way he was a very good captain. He was underrated. He got sullied in other things, which I think took away from what he was ultimately. But I think the potential that he had in him as a captain, I think he had, by the time he came in as captain for the third time, I think was probably when he was at his best. And of course, because this is Pakistan, he was probably at his most tainted as well.
Right. Nadeem, who would lead your Pakistan 11?
Before that, I'll say there's another captaincy model, the Inzamam model. And I love Usman's book. It's not written in a vacuum. He tells us how the country's culture and politics impacts cricket. But my question to Usman is, I was reading it enthusiastically, and I was waiting till Usman comes to Inzamam's time, when religiosity sort of just exploded. And I just wanted to ask him, why did he stop himself from commenting on the Inzamam days the way he commented on Imran, Miyadad, Mushtaq? I would have loved if he had used the same style of writing of those days.
Yeah, I think it was something that I really thought about. I thought that there might be something there, but ultimately I think it was I was a slave to the structure of the book. And because Inzamam is such a recent tenure, I didn't feel comfortable drawing too many kind of threads and conclusions from it, because it happened 3 years, I think his reign was. Ultimately his peak was 2004 to 2007 was his peak, and it had an impact on that time for sure. Pakistan, it affected that Pakistan team for sure, and it resonated with what was happening in the country, what had been happening in the country, the gradual kind of Islamization of the country since the mid 80s, late 70s even. But I just felt that we didn't have enough distance from it. And I still don't think we have enough distance from that reign to really know what kind of impact it has. Because if you look at someone like Misbah, who's come after him, and the team now, I don't think it's as huge an issue, religion and Islam and practicing your faith together as a team, which Inzamam did, and using it, which Inzamam and Woolmer did. I don't think right now it's that much of an issue. There might be consequences to it, 10 years down the line? I think, there might be. There's no doubt about that. But I didn't feel comfortable because it was a history and you have to kind of stop somewhere. Otherwise, the book never ends and you keep writing and writing and writing. And I felt that, I would be more comfortable writing about that with the distance of time. Maybe another 10 years down the line, we'll know exactly what happened. Because, praying together and stuff, even Miadad's teams did that in the mid-80s. Ramiz Raja, who speaks about it, says that there were always some players who weren't particularly practicing Muslims, but there was always like a core who would pray together and stuff. And one of the earliest images I remember, and you'll I'm sure remember this, was the Faisalabad test when he had that fight with Shakur Rana. And on the day that they were supposed to play Pakistan, and they abandoned that day, one of the most striking images from that day was Miadad leading the prayers of the team on the field. And that was like a show of defiance to the English, that look, this is what unites us and stuff. So I think I just wanted more distance from it to be able to write about it, I think, confidently.
Murad, you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, I think this episode about the religiosity provides, I think, the rest of us with a very good example. Until and unless you really internalize something, it will not survive. And I think the religiosity during the Inzamam era was kind of enforced by him. Yeah. And anyone who wasn't in that camp wouldn't get a chance to do so. But since he went away, it's become kind of more normal. And I think the same analogy can be applied to the country. If you force something and it's not internalized, it will not survive. And in a way, it also provides us with hope of what is happening in the country and how religious fundamentalism is tearing us apart.
We like hope around here. Nadeem, I'm going to bring you back, Nadeem, to the first question, which was, who captains your Pakistan 11?
Oh, yeah.
And
Misbah.
why? Misbah.
Yeah, because I'm a huge fan of Imran's when he was captain. Mushtaq is one of my favorites. Miadat, definitely. And Osman will agree with me, but when Misbah was given the captaincy, the situation of the country was terrible. The situation of the team was even worse. And coming in and sort of accepting the captaincy of that sort of a side in those days, and then surviving and doing well, that makes him a great captain. For me, it's going to be Misbah.
Okay.
There are some Misbah supporters in the crowd, I think.
Team Misbah is alive and kicking.
Team Misbah is alive.
Murad, who's captaining yours?
Well, I'm biased, and I'm not a PTI supporter. Well, I'm a supporter, I'm not a member. I'd go for Imran Khan.
Okay.
I'll go for him because, captaincy is really tough. If you're an all-rounder, it's even more tougher. So you not only have to look after your bowling, your batting, but you have to be a tactician. And to really have that ability to stand back, analyze the game, bring about the changes, and yet perform on the field is really a big ask. And I think Imran Khan really fulfilled that task. So for me, it will be IK.
I don't think you should get away without naming your legendary all-time captain to lead the best Pakistan 11.
I'm with Murad. And what does that mean, Nadeem?
It means everything, of course.
Because?
Because
That's a book.
Imran,
Because is a book.
because of the book.
Yeah. No, I mean, I suppose also, but for me it was because when I was growing up with cricket, it was Imran's cricket team. So there is that thing about the originating love of the game, and for me it was so much about the cult of Imran, and you can of course see the way that's a problem. And I actually take the Misbah point, which is when you have a weakened side and you come in, but there is still that air of Imran, I think, for those of us who grew up then, which lasts on.
But Osman makes a very good point, and I agree with him.
Yeah.
I wonder what if there was no Javed Miadad in Imran's team as vice captain.
Yeah.
Things could have been quite different, even though definitely Imran proved himself over and over again, leading from the front. He was definitely a very authoritative figure. But Miadad played a huge role in developing Imran's captaincy.
But I would say that would be one of the reasons for wanting an Imran as captain, because, and one could say this unfortunately hasn't happened in his political life, but I think it takes something to recognize that's the tactician on my side we may not get on, but I'm going to go and listen to him tactically. I think that's the sign of a very good captain, is to recognize where someone else has a strength that you don't, and even if personally you have problems, to bring them in. And I think actually Miadad was one of the great strengths of, or Imran's recognition of Miadad was one of the great strengths of the captaincy as well.
I think he had no choice, given the way Miadad is. and
There's that
Miadad
as
was.
well.
I don't think he had much of a choice in whether he wants to listen to him or not. Because if Miadad got something into his head, then it could be Imran, it could be a dead body. He will convince them of his view.
We may need to put Miadad into PTI now and see what happens.
But Kamila, I think it says also a lot about Miadad, how he would always step aside every time Imran would come back into the
Absolutely.
team and let him become the captain.
Yeah.
He could have stood firm and said, no, I will not play under him. But I think it's the greatness of the man that that he recognized Imran Khan as the supreme captain and accommodated him.
We're such a Karachi panel here. You know, but there are many surprises when you leave Pakistan and go somewhere else, such as England, and understand how cricket happens. And one, of course, is discovering that cricket is supposed to be the rich man's game. Another is that women aren't supposed to be interested in cricket. And the third is discovering, you hear everywhere, cricket is a batsman's game. This is given as fact in most other countries of the world. And from Usman's book, one thing that comes out is that for us it's very much not just a bowler's game, but a fast bowler's game. And I have to say, you really ignore the post spinners. I mean, Abdul Qadir hardly gets a mention in there for all, you know, his legendary status. What is it about Pakistan and fast bowlers?
Oh, it's two words: Fazal Mahmood, two more Imran Khan. If you're that good looking, and if you bowl that fast, or not in Fazal's case. And if you're taking wickets the way they are, and if women are swooning over you, I mean,
And
Fazal
men also.
was Fazal legendary, Wasim after that.
Yeah.
How can you go wrong with something like that? How could you want to grow up and be anything else? I mean, we've had great batsmen, Hanif Mohammad, Javed himself, Yunus Khan.
Yeah.
But if you put them side by side with Imran Khan, Fazal Mahmood, Wasim Akram, even Waqar Yunus, my wife loves Waqar Yunus for some weird reason, but she loves him. But
What's not to love?
well, the hair. No, but if you put them side by side, then who are you going to want to be when you're growing up?
Yeah.
And if you see, the way they celebrate, it's just everything about fast bowling. It's become so internalized in Pakistan that I remember when I was growing up, when I was first playing cricket, I didn't know how to hold a bat. I didn't want to bat. Batting takes too much patience. It takes thought. It takes time. You've got to kind of work out how you play against a bowler. You've got to work out what gaps there are in the field. With a bowler, like Imran used to say to Waqar, he just used to say, just go out, blow them away. I don't care what you do, just go out and bowl as fast as you can and take wickets from me. And it's just so simple. And I think something about that kind of chimes in. I think someone tweeted it like some while back, and they said basically that, Pakistan is naturally, I think, given to fast bowling and not batting, because batting is a very constructive, very introspective, very kind of thought processive and patience, kind of requires patience, whereas fast bowling, you come in and you just throw it down fast and you look good and you have great hair. Hair is a common theme in Pakistani fast bowlers.
Yeah.
And that's the way it works. And things like tape ball and stuff, tape ball cricket here has really given it kind of more impetus, I think, for fast bowlers to keep coming out. And I think fast bowling might be the most democratic activity in Pakistan, because you could be from anywhere in this country, and literally anywhere. You could be from Balochistan. You could have been from East Pakistan when it was East Pakistan, and if you could bowl fast, you would be recognized and rewarded in this country.
Usman, sorry, Kamila. Usman, it's very interesting what you say. We really have flat pitches. We have feather beds, and yet we keep producing these fast bowlers. How do you explain that?
Yeah. See, the curators in this country are a kind of, they're a very contrarian kind of breed. And I've known curators who have actively held kind of disregard for captains of Pakistan. Inzamam used to want a certain kind of pitch, and the curator would say, no, go to hell. I don't care who you are, you're Inzamam, this is my pitch. I'm going to make it the way I want to. But I would add the qualifier that if you watch domestic cricket in this country on the smaller grounds, then those pitches are actually green and very quick. And that's actually what has kept producing fast bowlers. And in a way, it's actually harmed fast bowlers here, because, they're used to bowling on really good bowling wickets. They pick up a lot of wickets in domestic cricket, and they come onto the international scene where the pitches are a bit tougher. And it puts them at a disadvantage because they can't bowl on better batting pitches. So a lot of Sialkot is one of the greatest fast bowling grounds you could ever hope to come across. Green pitches, conditions overhead are great, and you just want to bowl fast all day. It's only when you get to international cricket, I think, in Pakistan, where the pitches then become kind of flat.
One of the many very memorable lines in Usman's book is when, everyone talks about the production line of Pakistani fast bowlers, and he says, this isn't production line, this is democracy. So there are the links that you talk about quite explicitly in the book, the Kardar, Imran, Mushtaq Muhammad, Miandad. There's one that only gets raised in a sentence, but it's an intriguing one, and it makes, you want the next edition of that book, and that's the Wasim Akram and Amir link of these preternaturally gifted bowlers. I mean, the chapter on Wasim is one of the great pieces of cricket writing, and I particularly love when you talk about how Wasim at a certain point in his career where bowling became an end unto itself, and he wasn't bowling to take wickets, he was bowling to see what was possible to do with a cricket ball. And of course, Amir, when he came in, there was all this great hope. And with Wasim, there is the cloud over him. And we've got sitting here Farishta Gatti Aslam, who was so important in talking about corruption within cricket, and such an important figure in there. And as you say, with Wasim, he was never entirely innocent or guilty, but there was a cloud always. And with Amir, of course, there was certain guilt. How do you think the Amir chapter is going to play out? He's coming back into the domestic game.
I would hope that it plays out well, that he comes back and he restarts his life. I would hope that he has learnt, that what he did was, wrong, and it almost got him kicked out of the game permanently. I don't know how easy it will be for him. He'll play domestic cricket and he'll be fine, I think. I'm 5 years, physically what toll that takes on him, I can't say, but I would think the greater problem for Amir would be in trying to get back into the Pakistan side, where, there are still players who rightly, I think, would feel that he cheated them as much as he cheated anyone else. And I know there are a few players who, at least a year ago, felt quite strongly about it, because they went through a terrible time after Amir and Asif and Saman Butt were caught. They went through a really terrible time in England. They were grilled, all across the board, when a lot of them had not done anything ever, apart from just want to play for Pakistan. So I think that tension will be one that is going to be kind of, it's going to be a big moment for how Amir is welcomed back in the team. And for that, they will need people like Yunus Khan and Misbah, who are older and, wiser. And Yunus, I think, is generally a forgiving kind of guy, so they will need that kind of thing for him to come back. I personally think he's paid his dues. He's admitted to his guilt, which was I think the biggest problem with the first lot of match fixers here. And Farishte, she covered it in so much in depth. It kind of pushed her out herself eventually, because there was just so much happening. But I think the fact that none of those guys admitted ultimately of what they had done and what everyone knew had happened, I think that kind of tainted them, and it kind of, in a way, in an abstract way, it paved the way for what happened in 2010 with Amir. But I think, so the good thing is that Amir at least has acknowledged publicly that, yes, what I did was wrong. And he might play it up a little bit too much now and make him out to be the kind of innocent lamb who was kind of cut. And, my own personal impressions of him are that he knew a lot of what was going on. He wasn't as innocent as he makes out. But I just think the fact that he's acknowledged it and he's done it is a pretty big step, not just for Pakistan, but for fixing and corruption anywhere across the cricket world. So I hope he comes back, and I hope he can get back to what he was. But I personally, and I'm just adding on here, but I personally miss Mohammad Asif a lot more, who I think was possibly, it's hype, but I think he was the greatest fast bowler this country has ever seen. And I'll drop the mic and walk off at this stage. But
Nadeem, are you a forgiver when it comes to Amir, and a believer in what might yet be possible?
Yeah,
for him?
I think if I agree with Usman, if he's sort of confessed, I think he should be given a chance. He's still young, immensely talented, or was till 5 years ago. A lot of people miss the fact that this never used to be a problem, let's say, till about the early 80s, because Pakistani cricket teams were mostly made of urban, educated, semi-educated guys coming from either Karachi or Lahore. But after cricket just exploded after the mid-80s, majority of your players started coming from small towns in the Punjab, and it's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And those guys were not educated. They were coming from little towns and villages and thrown into the team and then taken to New Zealand, Australia, you know. So that was a huge issue. And this wasn't addressed. This should have been addressed in the 1990s when majority of the team was made of these guys coming from these small towns and faced with all sorts of new challenges. But this realization sort of crept in after that first big major match fixing story started breaking out with Azharuddin involved and Hansi Konya and even Waqar, Wasim, Mushtaq, Inzamam, all these guys, most of them who joined the Tablighi Jamaat, understandably, later on. So that aspect is still there, but that's why I think it's important to have people like Misbah. You know, okay, he's not from Lahore, but he's educated, very urban, very down-to-earth, moderate, and he understands. So, like Usman says, that hopefully Misbah will leave this sort of a urbane culture, which is forgiving as well, but understanding, more sober, for people like Amir and other guys who's going to come out from these small towns to sort of settle in.
The slight problem with this is Salman Butt.
Exactly. That's a normal. Yeah.
Theory, right?
Salman, but again, I'm not going to say that religion has anything to do with it, but one has to remember that Salman Butt was one of the first recruits of Inzamamul Haq. He didn't grow a beard or anything, but he used to pray regularly, and he was very close to Inzamamul Haq. So maybe Salman Butt are sort of urbanized people, middle class people who actually start exploiting this fact that you can get away if you show a religious face, and nobody will sort of suspect you because you're praying 5 times a day and your wife wears a hijab or anything. I think he got caught up in his own trap this way. So that urbanization of urban thinking was crooked on his part.
Murad, I want to bring you back to a question about Amir. I mean, so much of what goes on with fast bowlers is about belief, and you know, it's one thing, again, Usman talks about very well. What is the effect on a young man's mind of 5 years out of the game, disgrace? Do you think mentally it's possible for someone who, other than the very strongest, to come back from that?
I think so, yes. But I think you know, there are lots of factors that will determine that. The kind of support he has, the kind of guidance he'll have, the kind of mentoring he would require. But I'll just go back to what Osman and Nadeem have said. You know, the 3 culprits are not the only thing wrong with what happened. I think the responsibility is much wider, and it should be much wider. The whole infrastructure that supports these kind of practices have gone scot-free. The administrators, the managers, the you know, the coaches, and so on. So it's very, very difficult to think that it was only these 3 people who committed the crime. I think there were a lot more people in the know. If there are people, like Nadeem said, players coming from smaller towns, they needed the guidance and the mentoring. And we knew this was going on for many years. So why were they not trained and mentored and warned about these things? So I think we really should not only pinpoint these 3 people without absolving everyone else. Coming back to the question of Amir, I think he certainly seems to be very motivated. His inception in cricket was very dramatic. He performed so well. And I think a lot of these things may remain with him. And I think if he's kept himself physically fit and he's got some good advisors and good guidance, I think mentally he will be able to come back. Coming back into the Pakistan team perhaps would be very, very challenging, because I'm sure he'll be up against some very tough competition.
I just wanted to add that I don't think, you know, the qualifier here is I'm not so sure that it's just a small town problem. You know, the guy in the first match fixing phase, all the players were from fairly big places. You know, Wasim and all were Salim Malik. These were all from big cities, Lahore and stuff like this. I don't think we can say that, you know, just because you're coming from a smaller town and you're not educated, that you're going to be susceptible to this, because there's a lot of players who have played for Pakistan from smaller towns who have not fallen prey to this kind of thing. You know, and Danish Kanaria was another one who'd come from a big city like Karachi and fell into this. I think it's more down to the kind of person you are and the kind of exposure you have on tour. and the kind of people you fall in with while you're touring. This is one of the problems with Pakistan always has been that the players are so accessible to anyone when they're on tour, because what they want to do, they want to have the same food that they have at home when they go abroad. They want to meet Pakistanis abroad. And it's when you get that line between the player and the fan is so weak and thin that access is very open to these players, and that's when a lot of guys like agents like Mazhar Majid get their kind of claws into that, because they kind of see that, oh, these guys are such easy targets, let's get into that. And you would generally end up targeting the more talented players in any team, irrespective of whether they come from Lahore or whether they come from Gaggu Mandi.
I'm about to open up to questions, but there's one question which will come from the floor, so I might as well get it. The World Cup. What are your thoughts on the team and its chances? All of you.
If all of us combined here, like join our hands in prayer and do some dua and stuff, then Pakistan might actually get somewhere. But I don't like saying it, but I think this is the least interested I've been in any Pakistan side going into a World Cup for a long time. They've been battered by injury and suspensions. They're a pretty poor one-day side of late. And I just don't see them doing anything really at this World Cup. They might. The upside of that is that I can see them beating India, but then I don't see them going much beyond that. So I would say that maybe let's watch some hockey or some squash over the next few months.
Nadeem?
Well, but I can't say much about it. I was hoping that they'll do better, but recently with all the injuries coming in, there's a question mark. But I'll be supporting them. I always put money on them. I've been putting money on Pakistan ever since 1992, and I keep losing it. But my money is again on Pakistan, definitely.
Murad?
I think we play best when we are cornered, and we are cornered right now, and I think we'll come out fighting. We may not beat India, I don't know, because we've never beaten India in a tournament, but I think we'll probably surprise a lot of people.
Okay, there you go. You have every possible answer. We will beat India, but no one else. We will beat everyone else, but not India. Questions from the floor, please. And could you make your questions very brief, please? There we go. We should have a little.
Thank you very much.
There's a hand raised. Oh, do you have a question as well?
No.
The question is, does Osman think that Yunus could have been one of the best captains if it hadn't been for Ijaz Butt?
I personally think that he could have been a good captain, but it wasn't so much Ijaz Butt as his own kind of complications and the kind of character that he is, I think would have made it very difficult. I loved him, and I still do. And as a captain, I really wanted him to succeed, but I think somewhere down the line, his own complications would have probably made it difficult for himself.
Next question, the man in the check shirt.
You talked about Jazba among the Pakistani public, and it sort of goes within the team as well. So I just wanted to ask you, do you think that that's one of the reasons why we've never consistently been amongst the top teams? Because we've had the talent, we've had the batsmen, we've had the bowlers, but never consistently have we been at the level of Australia or South Africa for like a consistent period of 5 years or 6 years. We won the World Cup in '92, but again, beyond that, we've never really sort of been at that top level. Do you think that a lack of, again, sort of discipline within our side sort of stems from the public in itself? Like the way we support someone like Shahid Afridi, his inconsistency, but sometimes he just comes up with that performance and we sort of stick to that. We never criticize him for the inconsistency that he has.
Every side has a kind of passion. Every side runs on passion. All sports teams run on passion as well. I think the problems with Pakistan have been more structural. That's a very boring answer, but I think the problems have always been more structural with Pakistan cricket. Whether it's with the board, whether it's with selection, whether it's how you groom a player when he comes up. I think that has contributed probably more to the inconsistency than anything else. If you, just one quick example is someone like Omar Akmal. Everyone, the world knows what a talent he is and could be. But if you don't treat him right, then no amount of jazba, no amount of discipline will make a difference unless the board and the people around him are treating him right. And I think that's what other countries, get right, and Pakistan just hasn't done for a long time.
There's a question in the aisle there. There's a hand raised. Yeah.
I'm from India actually, and I can tell you that millions of us, our hearts flutter at the memory of Javed's last ball 6. So I wondered if there was a sort of parallel feeling here. I mean, is it an important moment?
Is there parallel here in terms of?
I remember Venkatesh Prasad getting Amir Sohail bowled.
Yes.
Bangalore
Yes.
96. That was a pretty big moment.
Yes, I think that's question over there. There's someone with a baseball hat and glasses on them who's now raising 2 hands.
That's me? Yeah.
Okay, we
First of
already
all, Swat, thank you for writing this book. We waited a long time for it. Since we're in Karachi, I wanted to ask you about Asim Kamal and Fawad Alam, but we'll skip that. As a writer, one of the things that really stood out about your writing was how you brought together culture and especially pop culture into cricket. Before you started writing, can you identify one moment as a fan where that connection really struck you for the first time, or very memorable occasion when that happened?
As in getting that kind of pop culture thing into, it was a very natural thing because if you're Pakistani, you're watching cricket, then you can't help but notice everything around cricket, which is the country around you. Whether that's someone like Janoon singing a song for the team, or politicians getting involved, turning up at dressing rooms. I think these kind of things all, or references of cricket in TV shows and stuff. Bushra Ansari and Anwar Maqsood lampooning cricket all the time. I think it was just a very natural way because it was so deeply embedded into every kind of part of the country, in every aspect of the country. I think it just kind of came naturally. And when you started writing about it, you couldn't just write about a cover drive, or you couldn't just write about ball hitting the stumps. You had to kind of draw on everything around that went into producing that moment. And I think it just happens pretty organically more than anything.
Could I ask the volunteers with the mics to wait for me to point people, because I probably have a better sight. So after you, there's the gentleman back there with his hand raised with the baseball cap. If you could go over to him. Yeah.
My question is from Mr. Samiuddin, Usman Samiuddin. Sir, you referred Mr. Imran Khan and Kardar as dictators at the beginning. I would rather, if you would like to say that some players, they shine through when they're the captains, right? Their abilities, they become stronger. Maybe Imran Khan and Kardar were the kind of people who really, admired the kingship they had in the team. And some players, like, they're low-key, they're down-to-earth, they take the burden of captaincy more, like, when you talk about Javed Miadad and people who, they're better as players, vice-captains, and others are like Imran Khan and Kardar, they love it. What do you think? Dictatorship and, democracy, though different cheeses,
I think Imran, and not so much Kardar, because his own performances by the time he was captain weren't outstanding. But I think the example Imran set as a player himself, his averages while he was captain in the last decade of his career are out of this world. They're probably up there among the greatest ever performances by any captain ever. And I think because he was the kind of personality that he was aloof, and he had only a very few chosen people in the team that he talked to. I think that created this kind of mystique and aura around him that players of that time responded to more. Someone like Miadad, I think he was, and Mushtaq especially. Mushtaq, very underrated captain. Nadeem, I know, rates Mushtaq very highly. He's very underrated. I think he knew how to handle players better. Difficult players like Sarfraz Nawaz, for example. Mushtaq knew how to handle him perfectly. And I think it depends more on, those kind of. Imran wasn't, I don't think, a particularly great man-manager, but through his example and his connection with the younger players in the side who looked up to him anyway. The kind of advice and instructions he used to give to Wasim, Waqar, Mushtaq, Aqib. I think because they looked up to him so much as, the greatest player this country has produced, I think that naturally brought out more belief in them. Whereas Miadad was a bigger thinker of the game. He probably had a better grasp of tactics. And Miadad probably could not see why other players were not as good as he was. he probably couldn't understand that aspect of it. Why can't these guys go out and score big runs like I can? I think that is probably where the kind of difference lies more than anything.
We have one question from the gentleman in the aisle here in the front row, and then a woman with her hand raised at that end. Well, there are two, but you'll have to hand the mic to one of you. Okay. But could we start here in the front row, the aisle here?
What's your take on Shahid Afridi? Probably the only icon we have in the team for the last decade.
What's my take on him?
Yes.
I love him. He probably deserves a book all by himself. I think Shahid Afridi, he's... in fact, Ehmer has written a lovely piece on him in this month's this magazine, digital magazine, the Cricket Monthly. I think Shahid Afridi, in many ways, represents a greater truth about this country as well. But just to go out and see him play, I think he's probably the best advertisement for youngsters getting into cricket. And people might complain that he's not a purist, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. But just the way he goes about his work and the kind of figure that he is, how can you not love him? He's Shahid Afridi. He goes out there, he wins you matches against India in the last over, he comes up, takes 7 wickets, bites a ball, tampers the pitch and stuff. How can you not love something like that? That guy is a book and a movie waiting to happen,
Okay.
My question is from Mr.
Sorry,
Nadeem.
where are we getting question from? I'd asked for the next to come to the ladies over there, across the aisle. While the mic goes there, whoever you are can ask your question.
Too many questions.
Yes, sorry. Yes, whoever's got the mic right now.
Yeah. My question is from Mr. Nadeem. Do you foresee Inzamam model inculcation mindset or narrative in future in Pakistani team?
Which mindset?
Inzamam model mindset, narrative or spirit again in Pakistani team?
Osman said that we have to wait for another 10 years to see, but I think there are some signs. Under Misbah, a lot of it has been neutralized, but we do get incidents like what Ahmed Shahzad did to Dilshan in Sri Lanka, told him that he'll burn in hell, stuff like that. They'll keep popping out, but that's why I think there's another reason why a man like Misbah has been very important. And I think it'll sort of get neutralized, especially if you also have people like Shahryar Khan heading the board. And if you read Shahryar Khan's books, he actually talks in detail about this phenomena a lot. So I don't see it happening.
Okay. Do you finally have the mic over there? Could you just stand up, I think, and ask your question, because for some reason the mic isn't coming to you. No, the ladies back there who raised their hands for about 20 minutes and been ignored. Thank you.
Thank you for the recognition. I've been raising my hand since so long. I have two questions, basically. One's the pretty humorous one. Are you a Misbah tard or an Afri idiot?
I respect Misbah and his achievements, and in a way I love him. And of course, you can't not love Afridi. But I'll say this, and I haven't written this once anywhere, but to paraphrase CLR James, what do they know of Afridi who only know Misbah?
Thanks. And the second question would be that what advice would you like to give to the young writers who are springing up on the websites and publishing their contents about cricket on the websites? So.
Oh God, I'm in no position to give any advice other than just keep writing. That's all you can do. Keep watching the game, I guess. Keep writing. There's a lot of young writers coming out of Pakistan on cricket as well. It's really good to see that you now have an option where there weren't that many before. But I think just keep writing and keep putting your stuff out there, and it'll be noticed.
In the front row, gentleman in a white t-shirt.
This question is for Osman Saab. आपके ख्याल में cricket is something that is very popular here and will be in the future as well. But what do you see as the future in terms of other sports like football or hockey? जैसे अभी आपने कहा कि cricket का जो होगा हम hockey देखना शुरू कर दें. What do you think is the future of those sports as well?
Is that to me?
Yeah, that's you.
It's difficult to kind of. Pakistan's danger is that it's becoming a one-sport kind of country, which is a really bad thing. If you think to the great sports that we've had before, boxing is something that's completely overlooked. Athletics, and I think what it needs is it needs what cricket needed back in the 50s. It needs one seminal moment. I think if Pakistan hockey suddenly they go and win the World Cup, then you need to use that momentum But I think, and maybe Nadeem knows also this, that, the state of our federations, sporting federations, is so poor right now that I wouldn't guarantee that they would be able to build on that momentum. So, I would love to see hockey and squash and boxing and football. Football, how can you have Balochistan, you have Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where they play so much football, and everyone watches football, and it's the easiest game in the world to play, or to get into. I would love to see those sports happening here, but, it's going to take a combination of many, many things, some of which I don't see happening, for some sport to really, kind of pick up here.
And the very last question is going to the gentleman in the baseball cap. Would you stand up so they know to pass the mic over to you?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, this is a question to the panel. We talk about corruption here in Pakistan and what Asif did and what Salman Butt did, but there's corruption in South Africa, Australia. There's quadruple the corruption in India, but they blanket it and manage it really well. What's our problem? Why can't we manage the corruption, or at least once it happens, what's the post
We have 1 minute to answer this because we're out of time.
I disagree that there's a lot of corruption elsewhere. I think in India, yeah, there was the IPL case, but I think they've managed to handle it pretty well in the last 10 years internationally. Australia, South Africa, I don't think there's that much, unless I see it, then I don't think there's stuff happening. In Pakistan, I think the example set by the first match fixing crisis and the lack of action on that led directly to what happened in 2010. And they've put measures in place now, and I think we're still so close to 2010 that something might not happen again, but we've got to keep those measures in place. And I think that's always been the problem with Pakistan at many levels, that once you institute something, it doesn't become much of an institution for longer.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for, but go and buy the book. And I think there should be a signing.
There is, 2 o'clock, there's a signing session, so I'll be there.
Is there not a signing session now, right after? No one knows about a signing. Okay, 2 o'clock.
Yeah, the Liberty Bookstore.
At the Liberty Bookstore, Osman will be signing his book. Go and get it before then if you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.